Okay. This is me reading from my novel, still in process, almost done, called It Was 100 Days. This is episode 5, and we are going to start reading on day 41. No, day 42. I have to edit the stream title. It's not day 40. It's day 42. And we'll see how far we get. We'll try to do this for an hour. What time is it? There we go. Okay, day 42. Sickness. I've been busy dealing with electrical systems today. It's finally starting to shape up. Everyone is excited with the progress. I'm almost starting to forget how, earlier, they tried to get me killed. I'm not entirely over that, mind you, but things seem to have improved. Staying busy keeps my mind off it. An interesting thing happened. A truck came by that was delivering food directly to neighborhoods. There was a driver who seemed to be in charge and 2 helpers. Now we know something about what that quad drone was for. The driver was asking how many people we had. Someone told him we had 60 people. I'm sure it's more than that. And his workers unloaded some food for us. It was a generous haul. Everyone was happy. Just 6 hours later, near dark, a different group came by, claiming to be from the county health department. They also asked us how many people did we have, and we told them the same thing. We also told them that we had a registered nurse, family name Macklemore. Of course, they wanted to talk to her. I was worried they would actually drag her off to minister to the needs of the wealthy elites or some such dystopian horror, but they didn't. Just as well, I'm not sure what I would have done about that if she was against it, but I promise it would not have ended well. I'm trying to be a better person, but they can't abduct our people, and that's all there is to it. It worked out fine, and they left after an hour, claiming to be in a hurry. According to the nurse, County Health were keen on us providing our health without resorting to... Right, there's something wrong here. I do read these because I catch weird errors. Okay. According to the nurse, County Health were keen on us providing for our health without resorting to county services, which were spread thin enough to be nothing. They have a county clinic set up in the next town, but it's a long hike, and it's always filled beyond capacity. Instead, they are trying to encourage local capacity to intercept and treat minor issues. They were impressed we had a nurse in our neighborhood, as there weren't many around, and wanted to make her as effective as possible. Toward that end, she requested some less common treatments and drugs, shelf-stable antibiotics, birth control pills, an ultrasound machine, and reference books. I made a mental note to look for those kinds of things whenever I was out on the prowl. As some of us were listening to her story, I got the impression that Nurse Macklemore was a little nervous about something. Afterward, I asked if there was a problem she hadn't mentioned. She was eager to talk and said that, apparently, there was an epidemic rapidly spreading across the region. A bad respiratory virus that was difficult to treat and tended to kill older adults and children if they couldn't get to a hospital. I asked her if it was another coronavirus variant. While she thought it might be, she couldn't really say, and the county people didn't think it was. All they said was that it was bad, with a 90% fatality rate in untreated patients. I reminded her of that couple we found a while back, and I think she shuddered with the memory. That was probably a close call, come to think on it. I also mentioned that I've been hearing people coughing at night in front of my house, out on this main street that's still open to travel. She said that if I heard very much of that, I should let her know. I said I would. We held a community meeting to discuss healthcare issues in general and a new pandemic in particular. Everybody reports being hungry, but otherwise healthy, and that's good. There were numerous questions for the nurse about the virus, but she had few answers. It was agreed that while people needed to stay inside the compound for a while, and that anyone arriving new to the community would need to quarantine. In either case, I suspect our walls are already the best response to this new challenge. A young woman in the crowd offered that she could grow medicinal plants. She had a private herb garden already and had taken a few classes online about medicinally useful plants. She said that if anyone had useful seeds or books on the topic, she could work with the nurse to start a pharmacological garden. This was met with enthusiastic support, and a meeting is set for tomorrow to discuss it further and to conduct a survey of resources. I just had a strange experience. I'm going to write it down before I forget. It's after midnight, and something woke me up. I couldn't tell what it was, so I went around the house and looked out the windows, through the cracks between the boards. Then I checked the security cameras. The front camera revealed someone sitting on the steps of my front porch. It looked like it was a woman with her back toward me. She had something in her arms, possibly a pet or maybe a small child. I could hear coughing over the external microphone, but I couldn't tell if it was the woman or someone nearby. I went to another camera, and I saw there were people standing in our driveway. That's fine, it's outside the perimeter, but I hadn't seen people on the streets for weeks, so it made me wonder what was going on. The cameras use infrared illumination to see in the dark, but they aren't positioned to monitor the street, so no help there. I could not turn on the porch light. That would be a mistake. But the moon was out, and I could just see people moving outside on the street, in groups and individually, and a man and woman pushing a shopping cart with children sleeping in it. Still curious, I went into the backyard and onto the flat roof of the patio. We have some container gardening going on up there, and there is a ladder for access. From the patio, I carefully made my way up to the roof ridge towards the front of the house so I could see from above and not be seen. It was the strangest sight. The night was quiet, just the sounds of coughing and murmuring voices. But there were scattered people on the street as far as I could see. Everything was very pale and white by moonlight, so in a way they all looked like ghosts, and all headed the same direction, north. At first I was a little confused because I hadn't seen so many people in a while. Then I remembered there was that community I had been looking at when Bear and I were exploring. This procession looked like it might be that group, well dressed and fed, just normal people like you might have seen anywhere in the downtown a few months ago. Clearly, something bad had happened, and these people were on the move in a big way. Was it the pandemic? The more I listened to the coughing up and down the street, the more it seemed like the answer. I thought they were headed to that health clinic the nurse mentioned, or could be they were just setting out of the area as fast as they could. Any way they could. Having seen enough, I crept away from the roof ridge line and back down the ladder. Now I'm writing this entry. I have to say, that was the strangest thing I think I've ever seen. With everything that's happened, I've never been rattled until now. Whatever it is that's at work, it's moving people in large numbers. God help them if there's another storm. Put another way, the storm might well be these people. Day 43. Surrounded. After I made that entry last night, I realized I shouldn't just sit on this knowledge. If we are surrounded by large numbers of sick and desperate people in the center of a looming epidemic, then that's going to become a complication. Not their fault, but a situation all the same. I need to take this up with the elders before anyone starts moving around and making noise, especially the children. The leader and I had a meeting with the nurse well before dawn. I explained what I had learned during the night, and Macklemore shared some of her thoughts, that there was probably another epidemic, possibly a pandemic, similar to COVID-19, currently making the rounds. Given the sorry state of medical care, there was no practical treatment and no vaccine. Whatever it was already impacting the only clinic available in the county. I added to this that a new virus was a huge security risk, and we needed to keep the disease out of the village if we harbored any hope of surviving it. In a nutshell, we should lie low, at least until this wave of human misery has moved on. The elders were in quick agreement. To now, we've been living a somewhat normal post-collapse life. Cooking, playing with children, working in the gardens, lots of demolition and construction work, coming and going as we please, within safe limits. We've been doing this with the belief that there was not much going on around us, and that we had become lost to the outside world. There was no one near who could hear what we were doing, or smell the food cooking. Now we're surrounded by a moving, living sea of sick and desperate people. Of course, the nurse initially wanted to do something to help them. The county had told her where to send people needing health care, and she wanted to go out and talk to the people, tell them where to go for help. While that was a commendable impulse on her part, several of us thought it was a bad idea to approach so many sick people from an unknown disease. Certainly not while there was something out there with a 90% fatality rate for some populations. After a lot of hand-wringing, the leadership voted against her going out. The nurse wanted to argue about it, and I understand her position. The Hippocratic Oath and all that. We also realized how the community was going to have to adopt stealth mode. This meant keeping everyone in their homes for a while, managing the children, not raising our voices, and not so much hot cooking. It was a tough decision. Of course, we wanted to help, but we couldn't afford to be overwhelmed or to become likewise infected with whatever was taking people down and causing this mass exodus. After the discussion was over and a course of action decided, we sent runners around to wake the others and reveal the nature of the crisis. It took about an hour. There was some pushback because people have already suffered a lot in their lives. Having to suddenly become fearful and paranoid as well was too much for some. The latter took convincing, with assurances that this wasn't any kind of despotic power play, but a genuine threat to our health and survival. I got back on the roof and spent the rest of the morning in careful observation, coming back down only when the sun was up. By the time I was down, the changes were in place. The compound was as silent as a cemetery. Few people were moving about, and those who were being adults. A couple was carrying pots of beans and rice around to feed the children. They were wearing face masks, and while I don't know how much good that would do against this virus, it meant they were taking it seriously. If nothing else has changed in people, we have at least learned to take dangerous shit seriously. It's past noon. There was another meeting called. I went because I was still the main observer. Nurse McLemore had called the county health people via the satellite cell service, explained the situation, and went over our approach. Apparently, they concurred we should keep our heads down. An hour later, someone reported that the quadcopter drone had made a pass over our location, but it didn't stay long. The Mora's son-in-law showed up yesterday afternoon while I was busy. He was found having collapsed on my front porch, where the security camera made a fuss about there being an intruder. Mr. Mora understood about the lockdown, and while conflicted, went to explain the matter to the elders and the nurse. There was an argument about it, that letting someone in during an epidemic was dangerous on many levels. After getting caught up on events, I suggested there was a way to manage the lad. One of the slightly burnt-out houses had an intact bedroom in the back, and he could stay there for the duration of his isolation. The Moras could visit with him through a closed window and pass in food and water in an unapproved manner. I said I would make the needed changes to the room myself, being careful not to raise any attention. There was more argument, but eventually they decided to trust me. It's going to be delicate work, not making any noise during construction, and with everyone being emotional, but not impossible. Nobody has asked yet where this disease has come from. It's a question without an answer, since epidemiology has become extinct. Or instead, the answer is only too obvious. The disease came out of the collapse itself. Probably it had been in the background all along, winding its way slowly through the population somewhere, sending people to hospitals, killing as it went, but not in a way fast enough to become a deadly epidemic, just enough to not go away. After the collapse, when both life-saving medical care and proper isolation were impossible, the disease found the perfect environment and took off. The takeoff was certainly aided by everyone suddenly finding themselves on the road as refugees, weakened, malnourished, dehydrated, packed into shelters, surrounded by others coughing and dying. As people saw what was happening, they fled the danger, in the process managing to carry the disease with them to the next chance encounter. Rinse and repeat, and in a week or two you have a firestorm of illness sweeping through the population. The only way to avoid this now is to stay out of the way of it. People claim to hate lockdowns and isolation. Puts a crimp in their style, robs them of their freedom, whatever. Maybe they've gotten over that. I suspect we're about to find out. Day 44. Lockdown. Most of the people who were in the street yesterday are gone today. A few people are left lying on the sidewalk or leaning against a building. They look exhausted, or they could be dead. How can you tell the difference from a distance? I remodeled the room for the returning son-in-law, Matteo. His wife's family left cooked food in his space, and blankets, and 2 sofa cushions for a mattress, and then he moved in. I sealed up the outside, the portion facing the street, so he would be safe. After the isolation period is done, he can exit by climbing out through one of the windows. There is a portable toilet for him to use, being a bucket inside a wooden frame with the toilet seat attached, and a basin for wash water. It's primitive, but he'll be fine. From what I could see, he was relieved to be home, or at least near home. His wife is understandably frustrated by all this caution, but grateful he is safe. Mr. Mora pulled me aside later and told me how Matteo getting this far was a close thing, and that the young man is not well. When I asked if it was the current virus, he said no, but would not elaborate. It's okay. There will be time for explanation after Matteo is free to join the community. Until then, food and sleep are likely the best thing for whatever ails him. Thus, the lockdown enters its second day. People are holding up as well as can be expected, but it feels like a death watch. We have enough food for a week more, and the city water is still working, but I can tell everyone is nervous. We're surrounded by a sea of lethal illness, locked down, and of limited resources. People are afraid of just being outside, so nearly all work has stopped. If we can't get back to work in the gardens, if the supplemental food shipments don't come, our odds of survival start to go down rapidly. Excuse me, it's late. I'm yawning. I'm not too worried, but I understand the reason for unease. Something is happening next door, in the house the Moras were forced out of. It sounds like someone has moved in. Nothing wrong with that, except I know from having checked that the water is turned off. If someone is also trying to stay away from the sickness, then I wish them luck. Were we not in lockdown, I'd check in with them. But they can't live there. Not because I said so, but because it is no longer habitat suitable for humans. Without food and water, they cannot survive. Humans need constant inputs, not just food, but also water and energy. Our accustomed habitat was always complex, has been for eons, and then it gets worse. Modern humans require secure shelter, working toilets and sinks, hot water, space heating and cooling, and a way to wash our clothes. And the word is require. Without these services, human life of nearly every kind totters. We also make use of technology for cooking and food preservation, for example, but also for communications, meaning cell phones, print newspaper, and internet access. In the recent past, even poor people had these things because they were thought of as a universal basic service, and indeed, they were universally important. Since the collapse, it's been a struggle to secure those for our growing community. It's good there are as many hard workers as we have, and that they are always ready to lend a hand towards refashioning our lives and environment on short notice. Even for all the work, people are hungry. The children are thin, their mothers as well. People working move like robots, slow and deliberate, conserving energy. There is now more sitting and resting than there was in the beginning. We have 3 kitchens running to feed all the people, and the elders are keeping a close watch on the food supply, not to guard against theft, but to get a feel for how long it can last. I don't like to think about what happens if the food supply runs out. On second thought, I think I will have a word with the new neighbors. We can pass them food and water, and they can quarantine in that place. If that works out, and they decide to tough it out, maybe they can join our community after the lockdown is lifted. That seems to be the trend. Reminds me, we need an accurate head count. Day 45. A family on the run. Early in the morning, I had a chat with the new neighbors. It started while I was working in the garage and heard some children over the fence. They were trying to be quiet and were playing toss with a ball when the ball sailed over the fence onto my side. They made a sound of dismay, so, of course, I just had to send the ball sailing right back. Wish I could have seen the looks on their faces. My action was answered by the scuffling of feet as they fled into the house, making even more noise as they slammed the door behind themselves. I went and got a ladder, leaned it up against the fence, and climbed it so I could see over. At one of the back windows, 4 anxious faces peered out, jumping suddenly behind the curtain as they got a good look at me. I saw a black man in glasses, a white woman, and just the tops of the heads of 2 children I had glimpsed earlier. Adorable. I waited until the man came out the back door. I introduced myself and said I was the neighbor, and welcomed them all to the neighborhood. He looked hesitant, so I asked if they were hungry or thirsty or needed anything else. That's all it took. A while later, I lowered cooked food, bottled water, and some blankets over the fence in a bucket at the end of a rope. While they ate and drank in the backyard, acting as if they hadn't had much of either in a while, I explained the situation on my end and how we were in lockdown, and then listened to their story. The story of the rights. The man and woman named Carl and Camilla, family name Wright, and their children, whose names I cannot right now recall, had been in hiding and moving mostly by night for 3 weeks, since their neighborhood survivors group had been overrun and broken up by some criminal outfit or other. Up to the collapse, theirs had been a nice neighborhood. Carl had been a software engineer, and Camilla had worked as a resource librarian at a private school the next city over. I asked if they understood about the epidemic. They said they did, had seen countless sick and dying people, and were terrified of getting sick themselves. After their neighborhood had been taken over by gangs, they had tried to get into another group a mile up the road, and it looked like they might when everyone there came down sick. It happened literally overnight. Camilla had wanted to stay and see what happened. Maybe they could try later when the sickness passed. But Carl had seen the danger and gotten them further away. Camilla admitted it had been the right call because a day later it looked like nearly everyone in that group was horribly sick and many were likely dead. The family fled as quickly as they could get away. But the next day they ran into even more people doing the same as them, and most of these were appearing sick and weak. There were packs of hunting dogs everywhere, and they had seen a pack tearing at a human corpse in the center of the road. Avoiding the dogs became a constant challenge. A day later, they skirted a gang fortress squatting in the parking lot of a strip mall, piled high with stolen appliances rusting in the outdoors. It looked like there weren't more than 3 people still able to move around. Worse, there were bodies lying neglected in the open, and the smell of death was thick in the air. There were dog packs everywhere around the camp, drawn to the bodies. The Wrights left there as quickly as they could, moving slowly to avoid attracting the attention of the dogs. Subsequently, they found shelter in a tool shed in the backyard of an abandoned home and stayed put, waiting for the number of people wandering around to thin. They had run out of food and had only a bucket of standing rainwater to drink. It was about the lowest they had been since things fell apart, but they were alive, and that was a blessing. It was another week of careful travel, sustaining themselves from canned food they found along the way, before they found themselves in their current situation. The story hadn't surprised me much. When they were done filling me in, I offered how they had been smart when they needed to be, and kept apart from others, and kept moving. This was likely how they saved themselves. Carl and Camilla agreed. I asked if they had a destination, and they said they didn't. They were just trying to find a safe place of food and shelter, and that mostly for the children. I said that seemed prudent under the circumstances. Then I suggested that they stay under cover of the house for 2 weeks, during which I could bring them food and water every day, and if during quarantine they didn't come down sick themselves, maybe the community would offer them sanctuary. On hearing this, Camilla cried. I gently cautioned against getting their hopes up too high, but that I would see what could be done. Meanwhile, to rest and recover seemed the best they could do for themselves, and if there were any problems or unmet needs, they should let me know. I came away from the interview with a renewed appreciation for how hard life was becoming for people. That, and I wondered, for at least the 100th time, where the government was, and why were they not helping. The answer to the latter is, the government is gone. It was never set up to operate effectively during a disaster of this scale. Usually, disasters would affect a single area, so that other unaffected regions nearby could jump in and lend a hand. The city government would get help from the state, and the state government would get help from the federal government. Clearly, not much of that is working anymore. The infrastructure of distributed aid has come completely apart. The obvious failure of our city government to hold up their end is shocking, to be honest. That the county is showing more resilience is reassuring, but only just. And where are the California National Guard or FEMA? Where are the troops necessary to maintain order so that food and supplies can be distributed without violence and chaos? The answer is they aren't anywhere useful. People perhaps having been overwhelmed by events, or been recruited to support a small part of an elite privileged society. This has become the national crisis, with every stratum and corner of civilization coming unglued all at the same time. Maybe there is support and resources being poured into the largest population centers, but I doubt it. The situation in very large urban areas has probably become unlivable. For the rights, our tiny community and I are all they have for support, and they found us only accidentally. It is a sobering thought how fragile is human life without the embrace and fortress of civilization. This was when I realized yet again that the world we have known and thought eternal is likely not coming back. Probably something will arise to replace what has been lost. Will we recognize it once it has? Will we even know? I wished the Wrights a good night and advised them to secure all the doors and windows. I also advised against making any noise while they were in hiding. They agreed and thanked me for giving them hope. Hey, we're all of us giving each other hope these days. Helping and being helped are both essential roles. We only get through this together. The lone monkey is a dead monkey. Day 46. A little humanity. Today I pulled another house onto the microgrid, finishing some work I had started before the lockdown. There is no way our existing solar capacity can supply the power we need, but as soon as I can get out of this lockdown, I'll go on a mad hunt for more equipment. There is probably another 100 kilowatts of kit standing abandoned within a quarter mile of our compound. Property rights be damned, I want it. If we can't get more power, then our tiny island of resilience is going to fall apart before spring. When I was done with that project, I went searching for the nurse. Gads, she looks tired these days. What a burden. I informed her, when I could get her alone, there was a family with children hiding next door, and that I was feeding them. She asked me if they looked sick, and I said I thought they were not. I explained part of their story and how they had avoided contact with just about anyone. She said she at least needed to check the children, and asked if there was an easy way to gain access without anyone else noticing that she was breaking lockdown protocols. I led her to the fence where I had been using the ladder, and took down 3 boards for her to step through. I stayed there until she returned. She was gone for maybe 10 minutes. When she came back, I didn't ask how they looked, as that wasn't any of my business. She volunteered that, apart from the children being mildly malnourished and dehydrated, they all looked reasonably healthy to her. She asked that I keep feeding them, whatever I could manage, in particular to keep the fresh water coming, and to bring her if any signs of illness appeared. I said I would. I also asked her to keep them a secret for now, as I was technically breaking lockdown by interacting with them at all. She promised she would, and thanked me for reaching out. I know she's still broken up by not having been able to help any of those sick people who passed just beyond our perimeter. That's not her fault. It's not anyone's fault. It's just what has become of our world. Now being able to do something for this small family, it's good for her. It's good for me, for that matter. Each in their own way, we're all of us clinging to our humanity. How long will we be able to stick to that? How long does human compassion last past the end of the world? Day 47. the turning point. I spent the morning working in the gardens. I haven't been doing much of that, and it feels great to be working the soil. Midday, I have a cold meal of sprouted lentils, a slice of fresh-made bread with olive oil, and millet soaked in seasoned salt water. It is surprisingly tasty and satisfying. Maybe this cold cooking isn't so bad after all. I did cheat by baking that bread, but I did it in the basement, so I was the only one got to enjoy the smell. As a penalty, I'll share the rest so the children can have jelly bread. It's worth it, if only for the sight of their jelly faces. Early in the afternoon, the county truck came around with another food delivery. It could not have come a day too soon. Even with rationing, the food has run low. I don't feel bad about feeding the rights in secret. They ask for nothing and are grateful for every morsel. Every time I get a glimpse of their thin little children, I nearly fall apart. One can only imagine how many children have already been lost outside our walls. How many more will be is anyone's guess. Infant and child mortality was always the scourge of humanity, reducing the statistical life expectancy by half. I guess we're headed back into that horrid age, though not if Nurse Macklemore has anything to say about it. So anyway, the truck shows up, but it's not unexpected. Seems someone placed a radio call to the county administrative center with news of our survival and a request. We have a small fleet of working bicycles for that kind of thing too. I've seen the scouts shuttling around the village with backpacks on, carrying what I can't say. They also carry messages, it turns out. Seems dangerous to me, or maybe the situation out there has settled down. The food drop is generous. They also deliver a cache of medical supplies, and then, wonder of wonders, a portable cell phone tower setup pulled behind on wheels. While the food was being carted off, to much gladness, the medicines ported to the nurse's office, nurse's impromptu clinic. A few of us gathered around the network kit to have a look. It came with a printout containing instructions on configuration and power requirements. There was also an explanation about what the machine was for. Briefly, the county government is trying to create a wide area mesh network, using the better established communities as hubs. Since we have power and security, we met the requirements. The goal is to get enough of these units up and running to provide a distributed mesh of low-power cell hotspots and WAN repeaters. I guess this is how we'll stand up a replacement cell phone infrastructure. I might be the only one standing around that gets it. This is a godsend. The towers have combined plain old 3G mobile cell technology with low-power wide area network, or LPWAN, and Internet of Things IoT technology. The kit looks suspiciously like something FEMA would have come up with, and an inspection of the packaging does indeed reveal a FEMA logo and contact information. The low-power WAN won't offer much bandwidth, but for anyone out of range of a regular cell tower, most of which have no reliable power at this point, the repeater will bridge SMS text messages via internet packet switching, and maybe limited voice. For the overall concept to work, they will probably need 40 of these things set up and running around the region, with at least a few having access to an operational stationary cell phone tower. Correcting something. That's not our compound. We get cell access only at the lowest cell strength, if at all. But the point is, it doesn't matter. Allowing for rationing of use, we ought to experience better communications overall. If that happens, we can establish regular communications with the other communities. Means, in turn, we don't have to make so many physical journeys just to get basic news and information, or to raise a regional alarm. As a few of us were discussing where and how to deploy the thing, I mentioned that this means there are others out there, and we are about to get connected. It's like a jolt of electricity passes around everyone. After all this time, some evidence of the world not having completely ended has emerged. Not that any of us ever openly entertained that thought, but it was always there, just below the surface of making every day count. So we are definitely not alone, and shortly we'll have the proof of that. I leave the repeater installation to others. The power draw is low enough. They can just plug it into a regular duplex outlet in one of the houses with a reliable solar power. It has solar panel backup and onboard batteries, so it will work in a limited way at night. I don't mention that the document says, almost in passing, that the base station can operate as a layer 2 device with any existing wireless mesh local area network, or LAN, using 802.11 protocol, plain old Wi-Fi. Well, you don't say. That will come in mighty handy at some point. All the kitchens, flush with resources, get to work. We haven't cooked a meal in nearly a week, and have been on reduced rations for longer than that. Since the immediate threat of being overrun seems to have abated, there is no reason not to let our hair down a bit, as if having a home-cooked sit-down meal with friends is a guilty pleasure. These days, it is. Oh, make sure the Wrights, still hiding like rabbits next door, are well fed tonight. Day 48, Expedition. I've made arrangements to be gone for a couple of days. Bear and I will have another look around, see what people have been up to. Maybe score some medical equipment or over-the-counter medications, or whatever. I am genuinely curious to find some of these, quote, other communities the county seems to think are out there. They also must have electricity of a sort, or else the county network people wouldn't be trying to build a distributed low-power cell network and WAN. I've spoken with Mr. Mora and told him about the Wrights living next door. I was slow to think about how they are squatting in his former home. Turns out he's fine with it. He does have some nice digs now, to be honest. In comparison, those people don't even have electricity, heating and cooking, or water. After the lockdown is lifted, I can go over with some portable tools and at least get the water back on. The gas service is a total loss for now, but electric service to the house is a possibility with minimal work. Eventually, I can bring that property back online as habitat and join it to the community we're making, but not right now. Besides Bear, I will not be going alone. I had a talk with the scouts. There are now 7, 4 boys and 3 girls, all living in the same house as before. I understand better why the nurse was keen to get a supply of birth control measures. That woman is on top of things. Anyway, it's cool with the young people. I went to ask if any of the team wanted to go out with me on an exploration, and before I had finished the sentence, all their hands went up. That felt good. I picked 2 of the young men that I had worked with before. While that seemed okay with the team, one of the 2 boys said that he would be willing to stay behind if one of the girls went in his place. I hadn't thought of that. My bad. Sure, why not have a female? Representation, it's a good thing. After a little discussion, I ended up with Ryan and Chloe. Nice kids, part of the original team. I knew I could work with them. I also noticed that Ryan and Chloe were sitting together in a way that suggested they might be a couple. I don't have a problem with that. I did say they should consider this a dangerous mission and not a date. They laughed, but understood. Once the decision was made, I pulled Ryan and Chloe aside for instructions. I asked them to pack lightly, bring at least 4 meals, bottled water, and a blanket or two for the cold. Then to meet me at the main gate of the compound at 3 a.m. Whatever else we might need, including more supplies and solid shelter, we could wrangle as needed. I explained that we would be out for a few days, maybe 4. I have no real expectations concerning what we'll accomplish. It really is a fishing expedition. Wish us luck. Day 49 to 51. Interregnum. No entries. Narrative resumes below. Day 52. The Militia. 4 days later, and it's near dark on day 52, remember to verify that, and we're back. Well, what the hell is going on? Ryan and Chloe and I returned from our outside mission about 3 hours ago. We're fine, and those two are infiltrating back into the community. There is a lot to write about, but that story can wait a bit. The most pressing business first. This might get messy. Okay, it's a couple hours later. Allow me to explain what's happened. Coming back and feeling satisfied with our exploration, which I will discuss later, the 3 of us nearly walked into an army vehicle, or something like that, an armored personnel carrier of some kind. Someone told me it's called an MRAP, or Mine-Resistant Armored Personnel Carrier. It was parked just inside the main gate. The 3 of us and 1 dog stepped out from around a corner and found ourselves approaching a big machine parked where our main gate used to be. Just visible inside the compound, 2 men in camo were standing around, assault rifles cradled in their arms. Fortunately, they weren't paying much attention, and we were able to pop back into cover before they took notice. Chloe nearly screamed, and was so afraid I had to leave her behind with Ryan and Bear, while I went ahead alone to figure out what the foosh was going on. So that was how we got involved with some random militia unit. It wasn't too difficult to resolve. Shorter version, Bear and I convinced them to leave us alone. Nobody died, and we got to keep the APC because I'm a punitive SOB, and they deserved to walk. Besides, it was evidence of criminal behavior on someone's part. The criminal behavior was they weren't militia or military or police. They were wearing cheap Chinese-made camo from the dollar store with no insignia, and their vehicle had lettering stating that it was surplus equipment donated to a SWAT unit associated with a rural county I won't name here. The men knocking down our front door weren't SWAT, they weren't police, and they weren't military. As far as I was concerned, they weren't shit. Another reason to keep the MRAP, there was a black woman in the back, handcuffed to her seat. I noticed her there as I was sneaking around, headed for my house. There was no way I was letting jokers drive off with a captive, so I grabbed some bolt cutters from the garage, circled back, and cut her free. She didn't appear so tough to me to be a prisoner, having not a single facial tattoo. If I was wrong about her, and she turned out to be a psycho serial killer, then so be it. I figured I could manage a woman in any case. I grabbed Ryan and Chloe while I was out of the house, and they brought Bear. Rescuing the prisoner wasn't just me being a do-gooder. I needed her free because I expected her to know more about these pukes than any of us had learned. Man, was I right about that. Once we were all back in the house via the front door, this was what she told us. Her name is Virginia. She is unmarried, and before the crack-up, she had been a receptionist for a large medical group operating out of the downtown. She told us she had no association with anything criminal and didn't know why they had singled her out to be taken away. The most likely reason being because she was young and pretty, but I didn't say it. Earlier that same day, these men had driven to a ragtag camp where Virginia was barely surviving with 7 others, a few miles north of our position. After waving their guns around and threatening to shoot anybody with ideas, they ordered the people to line up. They didn't search for drugs or contraband the way they initially said they were going to do, but bullied the men and groped the women. They took one more woman's rings right off her fingers, claiming those looked like stolen goods. But they pulled Virginia from the lineup, saying she matched the description of a wanted felon, and locked her up in the back of the MRAP. Having got what they came for, they left. Virginia had no family or friends to back her up, so that was the end of it. She was happy they hadn't killed everyone. Her account of events set the direction for everything I did afterward. I was confident that Bear and I could take these cowboys, and I knew just how to go about it. As soon as their search for stolen goods brought them to my house, the poop hit the fan. They barged in, swaggering and throwing their weight around, at which Bear instantly and completely abandoned his characteristic light-hearted demeanor. Good thing he was still on his leash. It was all I could do to keep him from tearing into the lot. They saw Virginia standing there, her arms crossed, and she is looking like a hanging judge, and were not happy. But they were also scared. While Bear was making a scene, I explained how they were guilty of at least 5 felonies that I could count. I added that I had already called in to the county government about how we were under attack by some assholes impersonating police. Subsequently, our invaders seemed to think it was time to leave, which they did do, though without their MRAP, their hostage, or their weapons, because fuck them. If there's a county SWAT team out there that wants their overcompensation erectile dysfunction toy, MRAP, back, they'll need to take the matter up with Bear. It seems he's claimed it for his own. As I'm writing this, he's asleep in the back. With all that now settled, I can report on what Ryan, Chloe, and I have been up to for the prior 4 days. After some exploration, we made contact with another village, not nearly the same size or stage of development as our own, but having a run at it. There was agreement on a student exchange. Essentially, we share some of our young people in exchange for some of theirs, as a way to spread best practices, and as always, to foster trust. Also, Chloe found a small cache of cosmetics someone had collected into a duffel bag and then dropped. She's got eagle eyes. I would have stepped over it. Chloe seemed particularly pleased with her haul. I'm glad it made her happy, but I guess I'll never understand females. Not that I need to. The girls are doing just fine, thank goodness, and if this kind of thing boosts their confidence, all the better. At the furthest extent of our wandering, just as we agreed to head for home, we found ourselves outside a warehouse of sorts. After some cautious snooping around, we decided it was safe to enter. There was a lot of stuff that I would classify as stolen. Dishwashers, clothes, washers and dryers, small appliances, furniture, stacks of mattresses alongside stacks of large-screen TVs, and 3 dumpsters at least, full up with loose bedding and pillows. It represented a really eclectic snarl, with nobody there to claim it. Funny how that worked out in the end. The assembled junk was of no immediate value, but interesting all the same. Being under a roof and out of the elements, this could become a remarkable resource with time, as our village and the other communities grow and become more sophisticated. But it was also disturbing, seeing all that household flotsam and jetsam piled high, like some cargo ship had broken apart at sea, and all this had washed up on a beach. A boneyard for the industrial age. All of it tottering and sliding onto the concrete floor, on an even longer slide into rubbish. What a waste. One could say the same of the entire 21st century right now. And then we found the girl. Actually, Bear found her. Ryan had him by the leash when Bear started woofing politely in the direction of a loose pile of clothes and bedding. It was clear he wanted our attention and had discovered something important enough for investigation. Under some loose blankets and sheets, looking as if they had become dislodged and had fallen on her where she lay, was a woman. In her early 30s, perhaps, but so filthy and bruised it was hard to say exactly. At first I wasn't sure she was alive, but Bear seemed to think she was, and so I took a closer look. Sure enough, she was breathing. Chloe nearly had a fit. No doubt she could see herself in that same circumstance, had she not found a safe community. The other woman was chained lightly around her waist and neck, and the chains were padlocked to a water pipe. She was clothed only in a heavily stained gray hoodie and filthy socks. By all appearances, she had been heavily used for sex. There was a large blood-encrusted bruise on the left side of her face. If I had to guess, someone had tried to kill her with a blow to the head and then left her for dead. We all agreed to free her, but after a search, I didn't find any tools for the task. Chloe tried to rouse her, to which the chained woman gave a weak fight. So she was capable of some kind of reaction. Chloe offered a sip of what water we had, and after some confused struggle, she drank greedily. I explained to my team that we needed tools to get the chains off. The woman at our feet said nothing, not a word, nor gave any indication of comprehending our presence. Without saying so aloud, I thought maybe she was deaf from a beating. Certainly she was deeply traumatized. After this, we came home as fast as we could manage, the better to come back for her with some tools to work chain. In our haste, we fairly stumbled head first into another kind of crisis, as I've related above. Once the militia issue was settled, I promised Ryan and Chloe I would go back for the woman as soon as I could. They asked to come with me, and I didn't have a good enough reason to deny them that, so we made it another date for the next morning. And that catches up our story. I hope the woman survives the night until we can get back to her with tools to cut her loose. Mateo Sanchez is back with his wife and is rooming with his parents-in-law. Seems like that might become crowded, but they all seem happy with the outcome. He looks exhausted and slightly ill. Maybe I'll hear his story soon. Presently, I'm too busy for much visiting. He is alive and reunited with his family. I'll put that one in the win column. The story of Mateo. I will enter the harrowing account of Mateo Sanchez here. A few weeks after his return. The story of Mateo's harrowing journey back. The story of Mateo's harrowing journey took this long to extract. One confidential talk at a time. I wasn't even going to write it all down, since it was personal. But it is an interesting enough a tale in its own right. His situation as it evolved was definitely a sign of the times. I have mentioned elsewhere that young Mateo had taken a job in construction, a fair distance from his wife's family home. I gather this had happened at least once before. The pay was good due to a labor shortage, and with the shortage due mostly to all the immigration enforcement from the last federal administration. Good money, but conditions were always tentative and difficult. He had been on the job site for a month, sharing an apartment down the street with 6 other workers. By reducing their expenses, the men could send more money to family. They took turns shopping and cooking, and it was working well. He got paid every week by corporate check, and then had to go into town to a check cashing site to get his money. The service cost him 4%, which, while steep, was not as bad as others he had been forced to use. The pay practice of the employer was that the workers were always paid 1 week in deferment, meaning the employer paid for the 1 week 2 weeks ago and still owed them for the prior week's work. This was common practice across the industry as it kept men coming back to work after getting paid, on the risk of giving up a week's wages if they did not. It suggested a form of wage theft, but migrant workers were accustomed to it. In any case, they were not in a position to complain. Things for Mateo proceeded in this fashion in the weeks running up to our day one, the collapse. At about that point, it all began to unravel. Anyone else might have missed it. Workers stopped showing up at the site. Not a big deal. They surrendered some wages, and that was their choice. Mostly, the missing had gone home to Mexico or other points south. That was the rumor. Then 2 of the housemates skipped town, one of them taking Mateo's cell phone on the way. He was angry at the theft, but more than that, he was cut off from his wife at a time when his situation was degrading rapidly. Just as everyone around him was hitting the road, the money dried up. The foreman, who also wrote their checks, told the remaining crew that the funds weren't showing up, not his fault, and so on. The workers laid down their tools. It didn't matter. The money didn't come. And then the whole world turned on its head. All the other workers fled, as if there were an immigration raid. There wasn't. Instead, it was worse. The nightmare scenario for these men was always the prospect of becoming trapped in the U.S., maybe in an ICE detention facility awaiting deportation to some random country, or just stuck with no money, and therefore no way to get home. Under the prior administration, getting out of the country had been nearly as treacherous as getting in, so when the money suddenly dried up, getting home was top of mind for the workers. Mateo's situation was not as dire. He only needed to get back to his wife and in-laws. From there, the family could decide what to do next. Leaving town, he tried to hitch a ride with some other workers headed south, but they wanted too much money. He tried to find a southbound bus, but the buses weren't running. That was when he panicked. Mateo stole a bicycle. It was probably abandoned, and started riding. He had some cash, enough for a few meals, but he was becoming frightened and decided he needed to move quickly. For the first dozen miles, he stuck to neighborhood streets, so as not to tangle with cars and trucks on the main roads. People were acting crazy. There were cars with bullet holes in them. Others were on fire. Intersections were clogged with abandoned vehicles. Several people tried to steal his bike, but he was quick enough to ride away. After that, he became more cautious. He tried to travel by night and sleep during the day, but he couldn't sleep at all, and by night he couldn't see. He could get maybe 5 miles a day in the scant hours when it was dark enough to be less visible, but not so dark as to make the ride an actual hazard. Normally, there would be some streetlights, but in many areas the lights weren't working. After a few days of stumbling around in the dark, Mateo decided to make a run for it by daylight. That was a mistake. He hadn't gone far before he was surrounded by angry men wanting his bicycle and his money. He surrendered the machine and tried to run away, but they caught him and beat him. Then they beat each other over who would get the bike. The whole situation was like a bad dream, and Mateo wondered if he would ever see his wife and child again. As it happened, he was closer to home than he knew, but there was nobody around would give him directions. He wasn't familiar with the area, having never actually driven it, and only knew in a vague way where he was going. He came across an ambulance crew who in turn directed him to a Catholic charity that was providing aid to travelers and helping anyone lost. It took a while to find the charity. Once there, he found a phone people were using and got in line. When his turn at the phone came, he called his father-in-law. With only 15 seconds to explain the situation, he gave them the news, got his bearings, and was forced to hang up on the call. He hadn't had a chance to talk to his wife. Matteo was given a small meal, the first he'd eaten in many days, before he set off again. He traveled by night, as he had done earlier, except now without a bicycle, and he traveled alone. He had no other choice regarding the latter, because everyone else was headed the opposite direction as himself, trying to get out of the urban core, headed into the rural areas of the North Bay, less often towards the east into the rural Central Valley. This observation is important. At some point, it seems everyone fully understood that south was where death was. Probably it was rumors. Maybe some of it was personal experience of south. I've already said all I intend to on the topic, but the prevailing idea that north has now become the only safe direction for flight reinforces my earlier point. Because he was alone and exhausted, Matteo's mind drifted a lot. He got lost, having used up his travel rations, being thin enough already. He had to find more food and water, which meant scavenging empty homes and shops. All this took more time. In the process, he completely missed the epidemic, having no idea it had happened. He did see numerous sick people, coughing and turning blue, and that scared him. He was staying away from people in general, so this didn't alter his strategy much. Likewise, he saw plenty of dead bodies, which he avoided. Being in an exhausted state, it was easy for him to imagine his own family had died in like manner. Starved, exhausted, terrified. Nevertheless, he kept going. Matteo's real break came when, while resting in the shaded space between two dumpsters, he recognized the neighborhood he was in. Everything was burned out or ransacked by looters, and the street strewn with blown garbage, but he recognized a preschool and playground as being near somewhere he had once lived, before being married. From there, he thought he knew the way. It still took him 5 days, traveling by night, and taking time to search for food and water. Then, when he showed up at the old address where the Mora family had lived, the one next to my house, he nearly despaired because it was clearly empty and had been for months. Nearly dead from his ordeal, the only thing he could think to do was to ask the neighbors, my place, if we knew anything about his family. Then, finding the doors and windows boarded over, he sat down and prepared to die on the spot. However, the front porch security camera made a fuss about someone occupying the front porch, and Mr. Mora, being inside at the time doing meal prep, went to see what the situation was. And so, to much delight and emotion, Matteo was home. As mentioned, it took a while to get this whole story out of the Mora family. Matteo was, for 3 days, too sick to talk. He was overall well. All he really needed was food, water, and sleep, and the loving embrace of his wife and her family, plus the relief of knowing they were well cared for, so that after a while he could talk about it. Even then, I don't think he wanted to talk about much due to the trauma being so fresh in mind. I have included the story of Matteo as an example of what it was like to be on the move during this time of collapse. We have few accounts to match his for detail and horror. There was nothing much about his account that seemed outlandish to me. Rather, I think it would have been typical. His youth and determination to reach his wife and child would have given him extra resilience compared to some others in the same situation. But his overall experience would have been the same. Loss of communications, no news, becoming suddenly uprooted and forced to hit the road. Confusion giving way to fear of violence. Getting lost and having no means of travel or getting directions. The nearly constant search for food and water. Traveling by night to avoid trouble, even if that meant wasting precious time, and then missing landmarks in the dark, and then running out of time as a result, and finally running out of hope. I wonder how many people died in the early days just from the effort of running away, falling to violence, falling ill, running out of water, giving up. The losses must have been immense. It took Matteo, a strong young man, traveling as fast as he could, with no family or children to hold him back, over 4 weeks to stumble home, covering a distance of about 60 miles. For every Matteo that survived, there must have been thousands that did not. The story of Matteo is the story of countless others whose fate will never be known. And I think I will end it there. That was day 52, a longer chapter. And we will start next time with day 53, Out of the Ashes. Thank you for listening. And if you want any more of this, we've got 100 days. So you can imagine where we are. Feel free to subscribe. Leave a like. YouTube loves that kind of thing. And I'll be back when I've got a little more time.